The CDC says overdose deaths have surged during the pandemic, and we'll talk to an award-winning filmmaker who is now taking on the opioid epidemic.
I came out of the doctors, and there was a representative of Purdue. She said, we have a drug called OxyContin. We pick up all the costs. Just take as much as you need. I said, sounds like a deal.
Within the last 20 years, more than 500,000 Americans have been killed by overdoses. Controlled-release OxyContin would be the drug that triggered the opioid crisis. But what if we discovered that the crisis started with a crime?
That was part of the trailer from the new HBO documentary, The Crime of the Century. A searing indictment of Big Pharma and the political operatives and government regulations that enable overproduction, reckless distribution, and abuse of synthetic opiates. The two-part documentary is directed by Emmy and Academy Award winner Alex Gibney, who joins us now. So what are the takeaways that we'll see in this? We've covered the opioid epidemic at length, and we've seen it firsthand in our lives. But what do we learn here maybe about the crime that started it all?
Yeah, I embarked on this project because it seemed to me that the opioid crisis wasn't being framed properly. It was being framed as kind of like a natural disaster. Oh, this is terrible. It's happening. All these people are dying of overdoses. But what can we do? It's like a hurricane or a flood. What interested me about this is discovering how the crisis was purposefully manufactured by companies looking to make a profit. And yet when I looked at it even more deeply, it's easy to say Purdue Pharma, which really lit the match that started the forest fire, is hugely responsible, and that is true. But it's a little bit like the Agatha Christie book, A Murder on the Orient Express, where you're looking for one culprit, you realize there were many, and there were pharmacies, bad doctors, government regulators, the Department of Justice, all conspired to permit the primacy of profits over people.
Alex, you cannot find, as you know well, researching this, a family in this country that hasn't somehow been touched by this epidemic. As you point out, there are 500,000 deaths during it. It's been a tragedy. It's a slow-rolling tragedy. It has wiped out entire towns, as you know. So my question to you is, we talk about Big Pharma, we talk about the role of the government, but what's the role of the middlemen and women, which is to say the doctors who were prescribing this stuff? Did they have any sense of how dangerous it could be?
Well, I think early on, and I'm talking about the late 90s and early 2000s, the doctors were essentially sold a bill of goods. There was a new fashion in the land, which is that we're under-treating pain. And by the way, particularly opioids and particularly time-release opioids can't be addicted. So a lot of doctors fell for that push, which was very much a campaign by Big Pharma. But over time, I mean, let's be honest, the business model for selling massive amounts of opioids is to target bad doctors, people who are more interested in the money than they are in the care of their patients. And the way doctors would become corrupted would be by being paid lots of money to be speakers on behalf of some of these companies. And in one case, I mean, in part 2 of the documentary, we look at a company called Insys, where the company literally kept a flow chart on return on investment. If they bribed a doctor, say to the tune of $10,000, they would expect that doctor to write at least $20,000 worth of fentanyl prescriptions. So it was staggering, and of course there were bad doctors involved. Though I think the important thing is to keep our eyes on the big picture here.
Alex, as you studied this, did you find any sense of a conscience at any point during this on the part of the pharmaceutical companies, on the part of Purdue, to say, my gosh, this has gotten away from us?
No. That maybe was one of the most shocking things. Purdue and the Sackler family has been utterly unrepentant, and except for the fact that that they're being sued in multi-district litigation all over the country, I haven't found much sense of contrition on the part of the other pharmaceutical companies, because it wasn't just Purdue. There are these massive distribution companies, Johnson & Johnson, many other, Mallinckrodt, many other companies involved. So it's the lack of contrition and the lack of responsibility. None of these people are taking responsibility, even though we now know through the investigation of the Washington Post that these companies knew exactly where every pill was going, so that if you track to a town of, say, 3,000 people and you learn that 1 million pills are going there, you think that's all going there for back pain? These companies knew, and yet they show no sense of contrition.
All right, part 2 of the documentary, The Crime of the Century, airs tonight on HBO and HBO Max. Alex Gibney, thank you very much for coming on this morning.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.